The scar across Helena's palm always ached before rain, a silver line that reminded her why she would never return to her old life. And today, the old wound throbbed as she hauled the ferry rope hand over hand across the gray water of the Cleave River. The spring current ran fast and cold, swollen with snowmelt from the northern peaks, and the flat-bottomed ferry groaned against the pull. Helena leaned into the work, her green shoulders bunching beneath the worn linen of her tunic. The crossing paid well enough to keep her in flour and lamp oil, and the post's merchants had learned to trust an orc woman who kept her ferry schedule as regular as the sunrise. 3 years she had worked this stretch of water. 3 years since she had run with nothing but the clothes on her back and the desperate hope that distance would be enough. The barge from upriver drifted into view as she reached the western bank, a broad-beamed cargo hauler riding low in the water with spring wool and barrel goods. Helena secured the ferry and waved to old Merrick, who ran the barge route. He returned the gesture, already angling his vessel toward the dock. Normal traffic. Normal day. She turned to collect the copper pennies from her 2 passengers, a tinker and his daughter, when movement on the barge's deck stopped her breath in her throat. Tall and broad, with the deep olive-green skin that marked the southern clans, Krev stepped into view. His tusks were longer than she remembered, filed to points that caught the morning light. He wore good leather now, a vest worked with brass studs, and his black hair hung in the complex braids of a merchant's guard. But his eyes found her across the water with the same possessive certainty that had driven her north 3 winters ago. Helena's hand went to the scar on her palm. The tinker was speaking, asking about the road to Millward, but his voice reached her as if through deep water. Krev smiled, slow and sure, and lifted one hand in greeting. "Miss." The tinker's daughter tugged at Helena's sleeve. "Are you well?" Helena forced herself to breathe. "The road forks a mile past the bridge. Keep left." Her voice came out steady, which was something. She accepted their coins with numb fingers and watched them start up the muddy track toward the post's cluster of buildings. The barge was tying up now. Merrick called out something cheerful about the weather. Helena made herself walk toward the dock, her feet finding the familiar path while her mind raced through impossible calculations. Run again. Where? The post at River's Cleave was the farthest settlement before the wild country. Fight. Against Krev's reach, and his new wealth, and the fact that half the humans here still saw orcs as beasts who should keep to their own kind. Helena. Krev's voice rolled across the dock, warm and confident. He stepped onto the weathered planks with the easy balance of a man who owned whatever ground he walked. 3 years. You look well. I am well. She stopped at the dock's edge, the water at her back. What brings you north? Can an old friend visit? Krev's smile widened. He moved closer, not quite threatening, but claiming space the way he always had. I have business with the lumber merchants. Heard there was an orc running the ferry here and thought, well, couldn't be my Helena. She wouldn't have gone so far without sending word. The lie sat between them, obvious and unchallenged. Everyone on the dock could hear. Merrick was already unloading cargo, pointedly not watching. 2 human dockworkers pretended fascination with a rope coil. I'm working. Helena kept her voice flat. If you need the ferry, the next crossing is at noon. Oh, I'm not in a hurry. Krev leaned against a piling, settling in. We have a lot to catch up on. 3 years, Helena. I looked for you. The threat beneath the words was gentle as a knife wrapped in silk. Helena felt the weight of eyes on them, the dockworkers, Merrick, a merchant's wife pausing on her way to the general store. Everyone watching the 2 orcs, waiting to see what orcs did when left to their own nature. I have work. Helena turned away, heading for the ferry. Her hands wanted to shake. She knotted them in the rope instead, checking knots that did not need checking. Behind her, Krev laughed. "I'll find you later then. We're staying at the boarding house. Plenty of time to talk." Helena did not look back. She poled the ferry to the center of the river and stood there, letting the current rock the empty deck, until her breathing steadied and the trembling stopped. The forge sat at the eastern edge of the post, a squat stone building that breathed heat and iron smell into the spring air. Helena made herself walk there instead of running, though everything in her wanted to bolt like a spooked deer. The ferry chains needed inspection anyway. She had been meaning to ask about them for a week. Henry Gannett looked up from the blade he was shaping when Helena entered. He was a tall man, lean and weathered, with the kind of quiet that came from thinking before speaking. Gray touched his brown hair at the temples. His hands, scarred from years of forge work, never fumbled or rushed. Helena had watched those hands repair her ferry more times than she could count, always precise, always fair in his pricing. "Chains?" he asked, setting down his hammer. "I think the eastern anchor is wearing thin." Helena moved to the workbench, grateful for something concrete to discuss. "Wanted your opinion before it becomes a problem." Henry nodded and reached for his coat. He never made a fuss, never questioned, just did what needed doing. They walked together to the ferry dock in comfortable silence, the kind Helena had learned to value. Henry inspected the chains with careful attention, running his fingers over the links, testing each connection point. "You're right. This one's got maybe another month before it's unsafe." He straightened, squinting at the anchor point. "I can forge a replacement, have it ready in 3 days." "Thank you." Helena watched the river, not looking at him. "I might need it sooner, if you can." Henry glanced at her then, his gray eyes measuring. He had never asked about her past, never pried into why an orc woman ran a ferry alone at the edge of the frontier. But he noticed things. Helena knew he noticed. "I can have it done by tomorrow evening," he said quietly. "If it's urgent." The kindness in that offer made Helena's throat tight. "Tomorrow is good." They stood together watching the river flow past. Across the water, Helena could see Krev talking with Marek at the dock, his gestures expansive and friendly, building connections, making himself known. "That fellow came in earlier," Henry said. His voice was carefully neutral. "Krev, he said his name was, asked about you. Wanted to know how long you had been here, if you had family, what your circumstances were." Helena's hand went to her scar again. "What did you tell him?" "That you ran the ferry and paid your bills on time." Henry picked up a length of chain, examining a link that did not need examining. "Said I didn't make a habit of gossiping about my customers." Something in Helena's chest loosened slightly. "Thank you." He didn't like that answer much. Henry set down the chain. "Asked if I knew you were promised to him. Said it was tribal law that you had obligations." "I'm not promised to anyone." The words came out harder than Helena intended. "I left because she stopped. The scar on her palm ached. I left for good reasons." Henry met her eyes fully then. His gaze was steady and clear. "Then I'd say you have every right to stay gone." The simple declaration, without judgment or question, made Helena want to weep. Instead she nodded, not trusting her voice. "I'll start on that chain tonight," Henry said. "Come by the forge tomorrow evening." He walked back toward the smithy, his stride unhurried. Helena watched him go. This quiet human who asked for nothing, who did his work and kept his word and looked at her like she was simply another person trying to make a living at the edge of the world. She had been half in love with him for 6 months, had spent countless nights hating herself for it, knowing she had no right to want anything when her past could catch up at any moment. Now her past stood on the dock, wearing brass studs and a merchant's confidence, and Helena had no idea how to make him leave. The noon crossing brought the usual traffic: 2 farmers, a peddler with a mule, a young couple heading west to start a homestead. Helena worked the ropes in steady silence, her mind turning over options. Krev had money now. He could afford to stay as long as he wanted. He could spread stories, claim kinship rights that did not exist, turn the community's baseline distrust of orcs into a weapon. She was tying up at the western bank when Krev appeared on the path, his timing too perfect to be coincidence. Helena. He stepped onto the ferry before she could object, his weight rocking the deck. "We need to talk, I'm working. Then I'll pay for the crossing." He flipped a silver coin onto the deck planks. 10 times the ferry price. "Pole us out. We'll talk on the water." The farmers had already disembarked. The peddler was leading his mule up the western path. They were alone, and Krev knew it. Helena picked up the pole, her jaw tight, and pushed them into the current. "You're doing well for yourself," Krev said, watching the water. "Nice little business, safe, respectable." He made the last word sound like an insult. "You always wanted respectable. I wanted to be left alone." "You wanted to run away from what you were." Krev turned to face her fully. "From your people, from your obligations, from me." "You're not my people, Krev. We were never promised. We were barely even together." 2 years together is more than barely." His voice hardened. "You shared my home. You took my protection. Then you ran off in the night like a thief. I ran because you put your fist through a door beside my head." Helena kept her eyes on the opposite bank. "Because you said I needed to learn respect. Because I woke up one morning and realized if I stayed, eventually it would be my face instead of the door. I never hit you. Not that time." The scar on her palm throbbed. She had gotten it the only time she tried to fight back, when the knife had slipped and cut her own hand instead of finding its target. She had run that same night, while Krev was sleeping off his rage and the cheap whiskey that fed it. Krev was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted to something softer, more dangerous. "Things are different now. I've changed. I have money, Helena. Real money. I'm running security for the lumber consortium. I could give you a good life. I have a good life. You have a ferry rope and a rented room." He moved closer. "Come with me, back south. We'll do it right this time. I'll marry you properly, clan witnesses and everything. You'll want for nothing." The offer hung in the air between them, wrapped in velvet and steel. Helena knew what lay beneath it. Krev did not make offers. He made demands and called them offers. "No." She dug the pole into the river bottom, pushing them toward the eastern bank. "My answer is no. It was no 3 years ago, and it's no now. Find someone else, Krev." His hand closed over hers on the pole, not squeezing, just present. A reminder of strength. "Don't be stupid, Helena. You think these humans accept you. You think they see you as one of them. You're an orc woman alone in a human settlement. The only reason they tolerate you is because you're useful. The moment that changes, they'll run you off just like any other tribe would. Then I'll go somewhere else." "There is nowhere else." Krev's voice dropped to a whisper. "You ran as far as you could run. There's nothing past River's Cleave but wilderness and worse. You're at the end of the world, Helena, and I found you. That means something. It means you should turn around and go home." The ferry bumped against the eastern dock. Helena pulled her hand free and tied up with quick, efficient movements. Krev watched her work, his expression unreadable. "I'm not leaving without you," he said finally. "Think about my offer. Really think about it. Because the alternative is staying here alone, ferrying farmers until you're old and broken. I'm offering you family, your own kind, a real life." He stepped off the ferry and walked up the dock without looking back, leaving the silver coin on the deck planks. Helena picked up the coin and hurled it into the river as hard as she could. The afternoon brought more traffic, which was a mercy. Helena lost herself in the routine of poling back and forth across the Cleave. The work was hard enough to occupy her hands, and simple enough that her mind could churn through dark possibilities. By sunset her shoulders ached, and her palms were raw, but she had a handful of copper pennies and no clearer idea of what to do. She secured the ferry for the night and walked to the boarding house where she rented a room. Mistress Calloway, who ran the establishment, looked up from her knitting. "That orc fellow came by asking about you," the old woman said without preamble. "Said he was your intended. That true?" "No." Helena kept her voice steady. "He's someone I used to know, nothing more." Mistress Calloway's needles clicked in the quiet. "He seemed very certain about his claim." "He's wrong." "Well." The old woman returned to her knitting. "You pay your rent on time and keep your room clean. What I think is that's none of my business who you're intended to or not. But you might want to settle it quick. People talk." People were already talking, Helena knew. She could feel it in the glances at supper, the way conversation paused when she entered the common room. Krev had been busy spreading his version of events, the faithful partner searching for his wayward woman, the tragic separation, the joyful reunion to come. Helena ate her stew in silence and retreated to her room as soon as she could without seeming to flee. She did not sleep well. Every sound in the hallway made her tense, though she had jammed a chair under her door handle. Old habits died hard. By dawn she was exhausted and on edge, but at least the night had passed without incident. The morning crossing was quiet. Helena worked the ferry in mechanical silence, her eyes tracking Krev's movements around the post. He was everywhere, talking with merchants at the trading office, laughing with dock workers, buying drinks at the tavern though it was barely mid-morning, building goodwill, establishing himself as part of the community. At noon, a delegation found her at the ferry dock. 3 men, all human, all pillars of the post's informal council. Gerald Hatch, who ran the trading office, Thomas Sills, who owned the tavern, and Marcus Day, who served as the settlement's magistrate and record keeper. "Miss Helena." Marcus Day removed his hat, his expression apologetic. "Might we have a word?" Helena's stomach sank. She secured the ferry and climbed onto the dock. "Of course." "This is somewhat delicate," Marcus began. He was a thin man with a lawyer's careful diction, sent out from the territorial capital years ago and never quite fitting into frontier life. "We've had a complaint filed. Mr. Krev has petitioned for recognition of a tribal bonding agreement. He claims you are legally bound to him under Orcish custom and that your departure constituted a violation of that bond." "There was no bonding agreement." Helena fought to keep her voice level. "We lived together for a time, that's all. I left and I had every right to leave. Under human law, certainly." Marcus shifted his weight uncomfortably. "But the territorial statutes recognize tribal customs for non-human residents. If there's a legitimate Orcish bonding agreement, it carries legal weight. There isn't one. Mr. Krev has witnesses willing to attest to the contrary." Gerald Hatch spoke up, his tone businesslike. "2 other orcs who arrived with him. They claim to have been present at the bonding ceremony." Lies, all of it. But Helena could see the calculation in their eyes. 3 orcs saying one thing, 1 orc saying another. Why should they believe her over 3 witnesses? And beneath that, the unspoken reality, it was easier to let the orcs sort out orc business and keep Rivers Cleave out of it. "What does this petition ask for?" Helena forced herself to ask. "That you return with Mr. Krev to fulfill your bonding obligations." Marcus consulted a paper. "He's willing to settle all debts or obligations you've incurred here. He seems quite reasonable about the whole thing." "I'm not going anywhere with him. Miss Helena, if there's a legal bonding, there isn't." Helena's voice rose despite her efforts. "He's lying. His witnesses are lying. I left because he was cruel and violent, and I will not go back to that. The three men exchanged glances. Thomas Sills cleared his throat. These are serious accusations. So is kidnapping, Helena shot back. No one is suggesting kidnapping. Marcus raised placating hands. We're simply asking you to address the petition. If you have evidence that no bonding occurred, present it. If there are counter-witnesses, produce them. But you must understand the law gives us limited grounds to interfere in tribal matters. I'm not part of a tribe. Helena heard the desperation creeping into her voice and hated it. I'm a resident of Rivers Cleave. I pay taxes. I run a licensed business. I'm asking for protection under your law, not tribal law. And you'll have it if we can establish that Mr. Krev's claim is fraudulent. Marcus replaced his hat. I've scheduled a hearing for 3 days hence. Both parties will present their cases and I'll make a determination. Until then, I've asked Mr. Krev to keep his distance from you and your ferry. Asked. Helena's laugh was bitter. Not ordered. I have no grounds for an order at present. Marcus's expression was genuinely regretful. I'm sorry, Miss Helena. I know this is difficult, but we must follow proper procedure. They left her standing on the dock, her hands shaking with rage and fear. Proper procedure. As if procedures would stop Krev from taking what he wanted. As if 3 days would make any difference when he had already won half the battle, by making this a question of orcish custom instead of simple truth. Helena forced herself through the afternoon crossings, though her attention kept drifting. She needed witnesses. She needed proof. She needed something to counter Krev's lies, but what? Everyone she had known in the South was either loyal to Krev or too frightened of him to speak against him. She was alone, exactly as Krev had said, and alone meant powerless. The sun was setting when she remembered Henry's promise about the chain. She secured the ferry and walked to the forge, grateful for the excuse to think about something concrete. The smithy glowed with forge light. Henry was working the bellows, his face orange lit and sweat sheened. He looked up when Helena entered, and something in her expression made him bank the fire and set down his tools immediately. What happened? His voice was quiet but tense. Helena told him, all of it, the petition, the witnesses, the hearing. Her voice stayed steady until she reached the part about proper procedure, and then something cracked. They're going to give me to him. I can see it in their eyes. It's easier to let him take me than to deal with the complications. Henry listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment, his jaw working. They need to hear from someone human, he said finally. Someone who knows you're telling the truth. But you don't know. Helena gestured helplessly. You weren't there. You have no proof, just my word against theirs. Your word is enough for me. Henry crossed to a workbench and picked up something wrapped in oiled cloth. I believe you, Helena, and I can testify to what I've seen here that you've never acted like a woman with unfinished obligations. That Krev came to me asking questions like a man planning something, not a partner looking for his lost love. It won't be enough. Maybe not by itself. Henry unwrapped the cloth, revealing the new ferry chain. The links gleamed in the forge light, each one perfect and strong. But I'm not going to stand by and let them railroad you because it's convenient. You matter more than that. The truth matters more than that. The conviction in his voice made Helena's eyes sting. Why? Why what? Why do you care? I'm just a customer, just another orc at the edge of the world. Henry set down the chain and looked at her directly. His gray eyes held hers steady and clear. Because you're not just anything. You're Helena. You work harder than anyone I know. You're honest and fair, and you've never asked for charity or special treatment. You're part of this community, whether the fools on the council see it or not. He paused, then added quietly, and because I admire you. More than admire you, if I'm being honest. The words hung between them like a lit fuse. Helena's breath caught. "I know I've got no right to say that," Henry continued. "I'm just a broke-down blacksmith twice your age and probably the last man you'd look at that way. But you asked why I care, and that's the truth of it. I care because somewhere along the way I started feeling things I had no business feeling. So if you need someone to stand up at that hearing and call Krev a liar to his face, I'm your man." Helena crossed the space between them in 3 steps. She cupped his face in her hands, feeling the rasp of his beard, the warmth of his skin. "You're not too old. You're not the last man I'd look at." Her voice shook. "You're the only man I've looked at in 3 years, the only one who made me want to stop running." Henry's hand came up to cover hers. "Then we'll fight this, together. You're not alone, Helena." She kissed him then, a fierce, desperate press of mouths that tasted of smoke and salt. Henry made a startled sound, then pulled her closer, his arms solid and safe around her. For a moment the fear receded, pushed back by the simple reality of his warmth and steadiness. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Henry rested his forehead against hers. "I need to tell you something. If we're doing this, you need to know what you're getting. Tell me." "I was a soldier once, territorial guard. Did 10 years, most of it putting down tribal raids on the southern border." He pulled back slightly, his expression pained. "Some of those raids were orc clans. I fought against your people, Helena. Killed some of them. When I left the guard, I swore I was done with violence, done with the sword. I set up the smithy here because I wanted to make things instead of destroying them. That's why you became a blacksmith." Helena understood now. Not just any trade, this trade specifically. "Yes." Henry's thumb traced the line of her jaw. "I'm telling you because if it comes to fighting Krev, I can do it. I know how, but I don't want to be that man anymore. I don't want you to see me like that. I don't want you to fight him at all." Helena caught his hand. "I just want him to leave. I want to go back to my ferry and my quiet life," and she stopped, then made herself say it. "And I want to see where this goes. Whatever this is between us, I'd like that too." Henry smiled, small and real. "Though my timing is terrible, telling you all this when you've got a hearing to worry about. Your timing is perfect." Helena squeezed his hand. "Gave me something to fight for besides just running away again." They stood together in the forge's warmth, the new chain gleaming on the workbench, while outside the spring darkness settled over River's Cleave. The next day Krev's strategy became clear. He was everywhere, always friendly, always reasonable. He bought supplies from the general store and complimented Mistress Calloway's cooking. He helped load cargo at the docks and asked questions about the best fishing spots. He played the part of the concerned partner, worried about his lost love, hoping to repair what was broken. And everywhere he went, he let slip small details. How Helena had always been high-strung. How she had a temper, though he loved her despite it. How orcish women sometimes needed a firm hand, nothing cruel, just guidance. How he hoped she had settled down during their time apart. Helena heard it secondhand, in the careful silences when she entered the tavern, in the pitying glances from the women at the general store. Krev was painting her as unstable, as the problem, and doing it so gently that anyone who objected would seem unreasonable. "He's good at this," she told Henry that evening. They sat outside the smithy, watching the stars emerge. "He always was. Knew how to make me seem like the crazy one, like I was overreacting to normal disagreements. People who have never lived with that kind of manipulation don't recognize it." Henry's voice was grim. "They see the friendly face and assume the truth must be somewhere in the middle. The truth is never in the middle when one person is lying. No, it's not." Henry was silent for a moment. "I've been asking around, quiet-like, about Krev's business here." Helena looked at him sharply. And the lumber consortium didn't send him. I know the foreman worked on their saw blades last month. He's never heard of Krev. Whatever he's doing here, it's not legitimate business. Then what is he doing? I don't know yet, but I'll find out. Over the next 2 days, Henry made good on that promise. He was methodical and patient, asking casual questions, listening more than talking. He bought drinks at the tavern and repaired tools for half price in exchange for information. He talked to Merrick, who had brought Krev upriver. He talked to the boarding house staff, who cleaned Krev's room. He talked to the trading office, who kept records of all commercial transactions. By the evening before the hearing, he had assembled a picture. "He's broke," Henry told Helena. They were walking by the river, far from listening ears. "The brass studs and the good leather are all show. He's 3 months behind on the rent for some rooms in Southold. He owes money to at least 2 creditors that I could find. The 2 orcs traveling with him are hired muscle, paid with promises because he doesn't have coin. So why come all this way for me?" Helena wrapped her arms around herself. "If he has no money, why spend what little he has tracking me down? Because you're worth money to him." Henry's expression was dark. "There's a labor contract being offered upriver, logging crews for the big camps. They pay a finder's fee for workers, especially strong workers who'll stick it out through a full season. If Krev can claim you as his bonded partner, he can sign your contract and collect the fee, plus whatever wages you'd earn over the season." The bottom fell out of Helena's stomach. "He's going to sell me." "Essentially, yes. It's legal enough if you're actually bonded to him. The contract would be in your name, but he'd have authority over it. By the time you worked off the season, he'd have his money and be long gone. You'd be stuck in a logging camp 100 miles upriver with no resources to get back. How did you find all this out?" "One of Krev's hired orcs got drunk 2 nights ago and complained about not being paid yet. Said Krev kept telling them the money was coming, that he just needed to secure his woman and collect the finder's fee." Henry's jaw was tight. "I bought him 3 more rounds and listened to him talk." Helena stared at the dark water. All of Krev's talk of marriage and family and doing things right, it was all just another con. She was livestock to him, a commodity to be collected and sold. "We tell Marcus Day," she said. "Right now, before the hearing. He can arrest Krev for whatever this is, fraud, attempted trafficking." "On the word of a drunk orc who's loyal to Krev," Henry shook his head. "That orc will deny everything in the morning and we'll look like we're making up stories. No, we need proof, something concrete that Day can't ignore." "Then what do we do?" Henry was quiet for a long time, staring at the river. When he spoke, his voice was heavy. "We let the hearing happen. We present what we know. And if Day rules against you anyway, if he orders you to go with Krev," he stopped, then started again. "Then we make sure Krev can't take you. Whatever that requires." The weight of that promise settled between them. Helena knew what Henry was offering, violence if it came to that. A return to the soldier he had been, the man with blood on his hands. He was willing to break his vow of peace for her. "I can't ask that of you," she whispered. "You're not asking, I'm offering." Henry took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I meant what I said, Helena. You're not alone in this, not anymore." They stood together by the river until full dark, neither one willing to voice what they both knew, that sometimes offering was not enough, that the hearing might go against them, that Krev had money and witnesses, and the weight of presumed custom on his side. That they might lose everything tomorrow. The hearing convened at midday in the trading office's largest room. Marcus Day sat behind a battered desk that served as bench and bar. The makeshift courtroom was packed. Half the settlement had found reasons to attend, drawn by the spectacle of orcs airing their business in human court. Krev sat in the front row, flanked by his 2 hired orcs. He had dressed simply, No brass studs today, just plain working clothes that made him look humble and reasonable. His expression was carefully neutral, the picture of a man seeking justice, not revenge. Helena sat across the aisle with Henry beside her. She wore her best dress, though it was still just homespun linen, and she had braided her black hair in the complex pattern of her mother's northern clan. A reminder that she had people, had culture, even if those people were 300 miles away and had not seen her in a decade. Marcus Day called the hearing to order. This is an informal proceeding to determine the validity of Mr. Krev's petition regarding Orcish bonding customs. Mr. Krev, you claim that you and Miss Helena entered into a recognized bonding agreement approximately 5 years ago. Please present your evidence. Krev stood. His voice was measured and respectful. Thank you, Magistrate. Yes, Helena and I were bonded in the autumn 5 years past. We lived together as partners for 2 years in Southold. The bonding was witnessed by members of my clan according to proper tradition. And what tradition is that, specifically? Marcus made notes on a paper. The Western clans recognize a bonding as established when a couple lives together openly for a full season and declares their intent before witnesses. Helena and I did so. We shared a home, shared resources, and presented ourselves as bonded partners to the community. It was not exactly a lie, which made it more dangerous. They had lived together, but the rest, the formal declaration, the witnesses, the intent, all fabrication woven through truth. I have witnesses who can confirm the bonding ceremony, Krev continued. He gestured to the 2 orcs beside him. Broken Horn and Stone Face were both present. They will testify. Marcus nodded. Very well. We'll hear from the witnesses. Miss Helena, you'll have opportunity to respond afterward. Broken Horn stood first, a scarred orc with a flattened nose and careful eyes. I was there when Krev and Helena pledged to each other. Autumn, 5 years back, just before first frost. They spoke the words in front of maybe 20 folk. It was proper and binding. Stoneface's testimony echoed the first. Same details, same certainty. They had clearly rehearsed. Helena's heart sank as she watched Marcus taking notes, his expression thoughtful. Thank you. Marcus gestured for the witnesses to sit. Mr. Krev, what is it you're asking this court to recognize? Only that the bonding was legitimate and that Helena's departure violated that bond. Krev's voice was gentle, pained. I'm not asking for punishment, Magistrate. I just want my partner back. I want the chance to repair what was broken. I've tried to speak with her privately, but she won't listen. I'm hoping that an official recognition of our bond might help her understand that running away doesn't solve anything. Several people in the audience nodded along. It sounded so reasonable, so sad. The patient partner trying to salvage a relationship. Miss Helena. Marcus turned to her. You deny these claims. Helena stood, her legs steadier than she felt. I do, Magistrate. There was no bonding ceremony, no formal pledge. Krev and I lived together, yes, but that was all. I left because he was violent and controlling, and I feared for my safety. These witnesses are lying, probably because Krev is paying them. Murmurs ran through the audience. Marcus raised a hand for silence. That's a serious accusation. Can you provide evidence of this alleged violence? Helena held up her scarred palm. I got this trying to defend myself with a kitchen knife. I cut myself instead. That was the night I left. A kitchen accident, Krev said smoothly. She's always been clumsy with blades. I tried to teach her better knife skills, but she wouldn't listen. I have never been clumsy with anything. Helena's voice rose despite her efforts. I run a ferry crossing, Magistrate. I handle ropes and poles and cargo every day. I'm not clumsy. I'm careful. And that scar came from fighting back against a man who terrified me. Then why didn't you report the violence at the time? Marcus asked. Southold has a magistrate. You could have sought protection. Because I was afraid no one would believe an orc woman over an orc man. Helena heard the bitterness in her own voice. Because Krev knew everyone. Because he was charming and friendly, and I was just some northern clan girl with no connections. Because I thought running was safer than fighting. She's always had a temper, Krev said, shaking his head sadly. I tried to be patient with her moods, but eventually she just ran off. I looked for her for months. When I finally heard she was here, I came to bring her home, not to punish her, to reconcile. Then why is your home 3 months behind on rent? Henry's voice cut through the room. He stood, his expression hard. Why do you owe money to half the creditors in Southold? Why are you broke enough that you had to hire your witnesses with promises instead of coin? Krev's mask slipped for an instant, something cold and sharp showing through. My financial situation is none of your concern, blacksmith. It's my concern when you're trying to abduct someone I care about. Henry stepped into the aisle, and it's the court's concern when those finances show a motive. You're not here to reconcile, Krev. You're here to collect a finder's fee for signing Helena up to a labor contract upriver. The room erupted. Marcus banged a piece of iron against the desk for silence. That is a serious charge, Mr. Gannett. Do you have evidence? I have the testimony of one of Krev's own men who got drunk and talked about how Krev needed to secure his woman so he could collect the money. Henry looked directly at the 2 witnesses. Was it Broken Horn or Stone Face who couldn't hold his liquor? Both orcs had gone very still. Broken Horn's hand moved towards something at his belt. Don't. Henry's voice carried the snap of command, the soldier showing through. Marcus, I also have a message from the Southold magistrate's office. Took 2 days to get here by fast rider. He pulled a folded paper from his coat. Confirms that Krev is wanted for questioning regarding several fraudulent contracts and that he left town just ahead of a warrant. Marcus took the paper and read it, his expression darkening. This is dated 3 days ago. Yes, sir. I sent an inquiry as soon as Krev arrived. You had no right, Krev started forward, his composure finally breaking. I had every right to ask questions about a man making legal claims in our community. Henry's hand had moved to his belt, where Helena suddenly realized he wore his old military sword. She had never seen him armed before. Seems those questions were worth asking. Marcus set down the paper carefully. Mr. Krev, these are disturbing allegations. The court needs time to investigate. Until these matters are resolved, I'm dismissing your petition. You can't do that. Krev's voice had gone flat and dangerous. She's mine by orcish law. Your human rules don't apply. Actually, they do. This is a human settlement under territorial jurisdiction. Marcus stood. I'm ruling that there's insufficient evidence of a legitimate bonding and significant evidence of fraud. Your petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering you to leave Rivers Cleave within 24 hours, pending resolution of the Southold warrant. No. Krev moved then, fast as a snake. He had Helena by the arm before Henry could react, dragging her toward the door. She's coming with me. Now. The room exploded into shouts. Broken Horn and Stone Face moved to flank Krev, blocking anyone from following. Henry drew his sword, the blade ringing clear. Let her go, Henry said quietly. There was nothing of the blacksmith in his voice now. This was the soldier, the man who had spent 10 years at war. Last chance, Krev. You think I'm afraid of one broken-down smith? Krev's grip on Helena's arm tightened until she gasped. Get out of my way or I'll. He never finished the sentence. Henry moved like water, faster than a man his age should move, and his sword came up between them. But he did not swing at Krev. Instead, he did something Helena did not understand at first. He laid his sword across his knee and snapped it with a sharp downward push. The blade broke with a sound like a bell cracking, steel parting in a clean fracture. The pieces fell to the floor with a clatter that silenced the entire room. "There," Henry said into the ringing quiet. He kicked the broken blade away. "No sword, no soldier. I'm done with that life, done with violence, but I'm not done with her." He looked at Krev directly. "Let Helena go, or I'll stop you with my bare hands if I have to. Your choice." Krev stared at the broken sword, his expression confused. "You're insane." "Maybe." Henry took a step forward, weaponless, unafraid. "But I'm also standing between you and the door, and Marcus just ordered you to release her." Marcus had indeed drawn a pistol from his desk, his hand shaking but his aim steady. "Let Miss Helena go, Mr. Krev. You're under arrest for assault and attempted abduction. Your friends can surrender peacefully or join you in custody." For a heartbeat, everything hung in balance. Then Broken Horn stepped away from Krev, hands raised. "I'm not getting shot for a man who can't pay me. This is over, Krev. Let her go." Stone Face followed suit, moving to the wall. Krev stood alone, his grip still tight on Helena's arm, his eyes wild. "You broke your sword," he said to Henry. "You broke your only weapon for her." "Yes," Henry said simply, "because I'm not becoming a killer again, not even for this. But I'll fight you hand to hand if you make me. Your choice." Krev let go of Helena's arm so suddenly she stumbled. Henry caught her, pulling her behind him. "This isn't over," Krev said. His voice was hollow, defeated, but the threat still lived in it. You'll shut your mouth and come quietly." Marcus stepped around the desk, the pistol never wavering. "Gerald, Thomas, secure the prisoner. Someone fetch the constable." The next minutes passed in a blur of confusion and shouting. Krev was hauled away, still protesting. His hired orcs gave statements, clearly hoping for leniency. People crowded around Helena, asking if she was hurt, offering support now that the outcome was clear. Through it all, Henry stood beside her, his hand warm and steady on her shoulder. When the crowd finally cleared and Marcus finished taking statements, Helena and Henry found themselves alone outside the trading office. The afternoon sun slanted golden across the muddy street. "You broke your sword," Helena said. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "I did." "You broke the thing that could have protected you, that could have ended this quickly." "I ended it anyway." Henry looked at the trading office, where Krev was being held in a back room until the constable could transport him to Southold. Maybe not quickly, but ended. "Why?" Helena turned to face him fully. "Why risk yourself like that? If he'd had a knife, if his friends had fought, then I'd have dealt with it, but not as a soldier." Henry met her eyes. "I told you I was done with that life, I meant it. But more than that," he hesitated, then continued. "You told me you ran from Krev because he was violent, because you feared what he might become. I didn't want you to look at me and see the same thing. Didn't want our first real day together to be marked by me killing a man, even a man who deserved it. I would have understood. Maybe. But I wouldn't have." Henry touched her face gently. "I want to build things with you, Helena. Forge things. Make a life that's about creation, not destruction. Couldn't start that by breaking my own promise to myself." Helena kissed him then, there in the middle of the street with half the settlement probably watching. She did not care. His arms came around her, solid and safe, and for the first time in 3 years she felt like she could stop running. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Henry rested his forehead against hers. "Come back to the smithy with me, please. We'll figure out what comes next, but I don't want you alone tonight." "I'm not planning on being alone ever again," Helena said. "If you'll have me." "I'll have you." Henry's smile was bright as struck iron. "For as long as you'll stay." They walked back to the smithy hand in hand while the spring evening settled soft and golden over River's Cleave. The weeks that followed felt like learning to breathe again. Krev was transported to Southold under guard, where he faced charges for fraud and assault. His hired orcs, granted immunity for their testimony, confirmed everything Henry had discovered about the labor contract scheme. Marcus Day personally apologized to Helena for putting her through the hearing, though she told him there was nothing to apologize for. He had followed the law and protected her when it mattered. The settlement's attitude shifted almost overnight. People who had been cautiously distant now greeted Helena warmly, ashamed of how easily they had been swayed by Krev's performance. Mistress Calloway lowered Helena's rent and clucked over her like a wayward daughter. The merchants at the docks competed to give her their business. But the real change was Henry. He courted her properly, with a patience and steadiness that made her previous relationship feel like a fever dream. He brought her flowers from the meadow behind his smithy. He taught her basic metalwork in the evenings, standing behind her to guide her hands on the hammer, his presence warm and sure. They took long walks by the river and talked about everything: childhoods and dreams, fears and foolish hopes, the thousand small things that build intimacy. Helena moved into the smithy 3 weeks after the hearing. It was not scandalous by frontier standards, where practicality trumped propriety, and besides, no one was going to criticize the woman who had nearly been abducted. Henry gave her half his workspace and taught her to forge chain links, praising her quick hands and steady focus. They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side during the day and tangling together at night, learning each other's bodies with the same patient care they brought to everything else. One evening in early summer, as they sat outside watching fireflies dance over the river, Henry cleared his throat nervously. "I've been thinking," he began, "about the ferry." "What about it?" "It's good income, but it's hard work for one person. Especially when the spring floods come or the winter ice sets in." Henry picked up a stick and drew patterns in the dust. "I was thinking we could rebuild it, make it bigger, more stable. Add a proper winch system so it doesn't rely on you poling it back and forth every time." "That would cost money we don't have. I have some saved, and if we're partners, really partners, we could pool resources, build something better together than either of us could alone." He glanced at her sideways. "That is, if you want to be partners, in business and otherwise." Helena's heart kicked hard against her ribs. "Otherwise? I'm asking you to marry me, Helena." Henry set down the stick and took her hand. "I know it's fast. I know there's still talk about orcs and humans and whether it's proper, but I don't care about any of that. I care about you. I want to build a life with you. I want to make you my wife if you'll have a broken-down blacksmith with more history than sense." "You're not broken down." Helena's throat was tight. "You're the strongest man I've ever known, and yes, I'll marry you." Henry's smile could have lit the darkness. He pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple band of iron worked with a pattern of river waves. "I made it myself. It's not gold or silver, but it's perfect." Helena slipped it onto her finger. The metal was still warm from being carried close to his body. Whenever you want. Tomorrow if you'd like. Or we can wait, do it properly with witnesses and a feast and whatever you want." Helena thought about it. Thought about Krev's talk of proper ceremonies and clan witnesses, all that formality twisted into a weapon. Then she thought about the broken sword on the trading office floor, about Henry standing weaponless between her and danger. "Let's do it at the ferry," she said. "At the water's edge, with Marcus to witness. Simple and real, just us promising ourselves to each other." "That sounds perfect." They married 3 days later on a bright morning with the river running clear and fast. Marcus Day performed the brief ceremony, his legal words mixing with the sound of water over stones. Henry wore his best shirt and looked nervous as a boy. Helena wore wild roses in her hair and could not stop smiling. When Marcus pronounced them wed, Henry kissed her like she was something precious and rare, and the handful of friends they had invited cheered. Mistress Calloway cried. Gerald Hatch produced a bottle of decent wine, and they toasted the new couple with rough frontier joy. But the best part came after, when everyone had gone home and Helena and Henry stood alone at the ferry dock, watching the sunset paint the water gold. You know what I realized? Helena leaned against her husband's side, savoring the newness of that word. Krev said I'd run as far as I could run, that there was nowhere else to go. He was right about that. But he thought that made me trapped. He didn't understand that it made me found. Helena looked up at Henry. I ran until I couldn't run anymore, and that's where I found home, found you. Henry pulled her close. Then I'm glad you ran. Glad you ended up here at the edge of the world. Glad you gave me the chance to be the man I wanted to be instead of the one I was. What are we going to do with the rest of our lives? Helena asked. It was a vast question, open as the sky. Build the best damn ferry on the Cleave River. Henry's voice was light but certain. Forge things. Make a home. Grow old together and argue about who's too stubborn to take a rest day. All the boring, beautiful, everyday things people do when they love each other. That sounds good. Helena turned in his arms to kiss him properly. That sounds perfect. They began work on the new ferry the next week. Henry brought his metalworking skills and Helena her knowledge of the river's moods and currents. They designed it together, arguing good-naturedly about pulley placement and deck width, compromising and adjusting until they had something that felt right. The settlement pitched in. Farmers donated lumber. Merchants gave discount prices on rope and hardware. Thomas Sills organized a work party to help with the heavy construction. What had started as a project became a community effort, Rivers Cleave building something for itself and for the couple who had become part of its fabric. By late summer, the new ferry was ready. It was twice the size of the old one, with a proper winch system that let two people manage the crossing with half the effort. Henry had forged decorative iron railings worked with patterns of wheat and waves, symbols of land and water joined. Helena carved their initials into the oak steering post, HG and HD, twined together like the river and the shore. They christened it on a golden afternoon with half the settlement in attendance. Mistress Calloway broke a bottle of cider against the bow. Marcus Day gave a speech about progress and partnership. Then Henry and Helena took the ferry across the Cleave together for the first time, her hand steady on the steering pole and his on the winch, working in perfect tandem. On the far bank, Henry pulled her close. Equal partners. Just like I promised. Better than I ever imagined. Helena kissed him, tasting cider and happiness. Thank you for everything, for believing me, for standing up for me, for showing me what partnership really means. Thank you for staying. Henry brushed a strand of hair from her face. For trusting me, for giving me the chance to be more than my past. They stood together watching the river flow past, the new ferry rocking gently beneath them. Behind them, the settlement of Rivers Cleave went about its business, and ahead the wild country stretched to the horizon, no longer a place to flee but simply the world, vast and full of possibility. You ever regret it? Henry asked quietly. Staying here instead of going somewhere larger, somewhere with more opportunities? Helena considered the question seriously. She thought about the cities she might have seen, the life she might have built somewhere else, somewhere her greenish skin and small tusks drew less attention. Then she thought about the smithy's warmth, about forging metal alongside the man she loved, about the simple joy of poling the ferry across water she knew as well as her own hands. Not for a second, she said. This is home. Your home. That's more than enough. As autumn painted the valley in shades of amber and rust, Helena discovered she was pregnant. She told Henry one evening as they sat by the forge, his hand stilling on the bellows as the news sank in. A baby. His voice was hushed, awed. We're having a baby, we are. Helena took his hand and placed it on her still flat belly. Due in the spring, near as I can figure. Henry pulled her into his arms, his face pressed against her hair. She felt him shake and realized he was crying, great silent tears of joy that soaked into her shoulder. I thought I was too old for this, he managed. Thought I'd missed my chance at a family. Apparently not. Helena held him tight. We're going to be parents, Henry. Are you ready? Not even a little bit, he laughed, watery but genuine. But I'll learn, we'll learn together. They prepared through the winter. Henry building a cradle from oak and iron while Helena knitted blankets and tried not to worry about every small ache and flutter. The settlement rallied around them again, the women sharing advice and old baby clothes, the men helping Henry add a room onto the smithy for the nursery. The baby came on a soft spring morning when the meadow behind the smithy was gold with dandelions. The labor was long and hard, Helena sweating and swearing through the contractions while Mistress Calloway coached her and Henry held her hand, his face gray with worry. When the baby finally emerged, squalling and perfect, the midwife laughed in surprise. You've got a daughter. A beautiful baby girl. Helena held her newborn close, marveling at the tiny face, the perfect fingers, the way the baby's skin was a soft sage green that might pass for human in certain light or might not, and either way was beautiful. Hello, little one. I'm your mama. Henry bent close, his hand gentle on the baby's downy head. She's perfect. She's absolutely perfect. His voice broke. What should we name her? Helena had thought about this through the long winter months. She knew the list they had been given, knew the first daughter should have a name starting with L. But as she looked at her child, at the new life she and Henry had made together, one name felt right. Luna, she said. For the moon that lights the way in darkness. Luna Gannett. Luna, Henry repeated softly. He kissed Helena's forehead, then the baby's. Welcome to the world, Luna. Welcome home. The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Luna was a fussy baby, colicky and demanding, but Helena and Henry shared the burden with patient good humor. They took turns walking her at night, singing half-remembered lullabies and making up new ones when the old songs failed. They navigated the challenges of new parenthood together, the sleepless nights, the endless diapers, the terrifying responsibility of keeping a tiny human alive. The settlement embraced Luna as one of their own. The children were fascinated by her pointed ears and curious about the tiny buds that would eventually become tusks. The adults simply accepted her as Henry and Helena's daughter, part of Cleave's next generation. By summer, Luna was smiling and grabbing at everything in reach. Helena strapped her to her back in a sling and worked the ferry one-handed while Henry minded the smithy. They had worked out a rhythm, trading off childcare and work in a constant dance of partnership. One afternoon, as Helena was securing the ferry after the noon crossing, a familiar barge appeared upriver. She tensed instinctively, but it was only Merrick making his regular run. He waved as he approached, and Helena relaxed. Afternoon, Helena, he called as his crew secured the barge. Got a passenger asking for Cleave. Says she knows you. An orc woman stepped onto the dock, older than Helena and broader through the shoulders, her skin a darker green and her tusks filed smooth. She wore traveling clothes and carried a pack, and her face was weathered by sun and worry. Helena stared. Aunt Greta, the woman smiled, tired but genuine. Hello, child. Took me a while to track you down. They embraced, Luna squeaking in her sling between them. Greta pulled back to look at the baby, her expression softening. So the rumors are true. You married a human and had a babe. She touched Luna's cheek gently. She's beautiful, Helena, absolutely beautiful. What are you doing here? Helena's mind was still catching up. How did you find me? Your brother heard talk of an orc woman running a ferry at the edge of the territories. Took him a year to track down which one, but he managed it. Greta's smile faded. He's worried about you, Helena. We all are. You left without a word. We thought something terrible had happened. Guilt twisted in Helena's chest. In her flight from Krev, she had not thought about the family she left behind, the people who might worry. I'm sorry. I was running from someone, and I thought if I told anyone where I was going, he might find out. The man who hurt you. Greta's voice was flat. Yes. I heard about that too. Heard he came after you and got arrested for his trouble. News travels. Slowly, but it travels. Greta shouldered her pack. I didn't come to scold you, child. I came to see if you're well, if you're safe. To meet this human husband of yours and judge if he's worthy. Helena laughed despite herself. Come on. I'll introduce you. Though I warn you, he's covered in soot and probably hasn't eaten since breakfast. They found Henry at the forge, exactly as predicted. He looked up at their approach, his expression cautious until Helena made introductions. Henry, this is my Aunt Greta. She helped raise me after my parents died. Madam. Henry wiped his hands on his apron and extended one. It's an honor. Greta shook his hand, her grip firm, her eyes measuring. My niece tells me you broke your sword rather than kill the man who threatened her. Yes, madam, I did. That was either very brave or very foolish. Probably both. Henry met her gaze steadily. But I meant what it symbolized. I'm done with violence. I want to build a life with Helena, not destroy things. Greta was silent for a long moment, studying him. Then she smiled. You'll do, blacksmith. You'll do just fine. She stayed for a week, getting to know Henry and Luna and the life Helena had built. She helped with the ferry and told stories of Helena's childhood that made Henry laugh and Helena groan with embarrassment. She taught them both orcish lullabies and the proper way to make northern-style flatbread. On her last night, as they sat around the smithy's hearth, Greta pulled Helena aside. You're happy here, she said. It was not a question. I am. Helena looked at Henry, who was bouncing Luna on his knee and making her giggle. Happier than I ever thought I could be. Then you made the right choice, running north. But you should write to your brother. Let him know you're well. The not knowing has been hard on him. I will. Helena squeezed her aunt's hand. Thank you for coming, for checking on me, for approving of Henry. He's a good man. You chose well. Greta smiled. And that baby is a treasure. Raise her well, Helena. Teach her to be strong like you, but also to accept help when it's offered. You spent too long thinking you had to handle everything alone. I'm learning. Helena glanced at Henry again. He's teaching me. Greta left the next morning with promises to pass word to Helena's brother and invitations to visit anytime. Helena watched her disappear up the northern trail, feeling both sadness at the parting and a deep contentment. Her past and her present had touched and acknowledged each other. She was not running anymore. She was simply living. The seasons turned. Luna grew into a bright, curious toddler who loved the ferry and the forge in equal measure. She played at Henry's feet while he worked, banging on scrap metal with a wooden hammer, and she rode on Helena's back during crossings, squealing with delight at the river's spray. The business prospered. The new ferry could handle larger loads, and word spread about the reliable service at River's Cleave. Henry and Helena hired a young man to help with the forge so Henry could spend more time on the ferry. And together, they built a reputation for fair dealing and good work. Other changes came to River's Cleave as well. More families settled the valley. The post grew from a loose collection of buildings into something approaching a proper town, with a schoolhouse and a church and regular mail service. Helena served on the town council alongside Marcus Day and Gerald Hatch, her opinion respected and sought. The world was changing too, though more slowly. Territorial law began to recognize mixed marriages officially, removing the legal limbo that had made people like Helena vulnerable. Anti-trafficking statutes tightened, making Krev's scheme explicitly illegal. It was not perfect. Prejudice still existed, and some settlements still refused to allow orcs at all, but it was progress. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Henry and Helena closed the ferry for the day and walked together to the meadow behind the smithy. It was summer, and the grass was thick with wildflowers. They spread a blanket and lay together watching clouds drift past. "Do you remember what you said the day we married?" Henry asked. "About running until you couldn't run anymore." "I do." Helena rolled onto her side to face him. "Why?" "Because I was thinking about it. How sometimes the end of running is just the beginning of something better. How the things that seem like endings are actually doorways if you're brave enough to walk through them. That's very philosophical for a blacksmith. I married an orc woman and broke my sword. I'm allowed to be philosophical." Henry grinned, then grew serious. "I just wanted you to know that every day with you has been a gift, Helena. Every single day, even the hard ones. Especially the hard ones, because those are the days we learned what we're made of together." Helena kissed him, slow and sweet. "I love you, Henry Gannett. Thank you for giving me a life I never knew I could have. Thank you for staying, for building this with me." Henry pulled her close, "For being my partner in every sense of the word." Luna found them there an hour later, having escaped from Mistress Calloway's supervision. She threw herself onto the blanket between them, laughing, and they sandwich hugged her until she squealed for mercy. Then they walked back together as a family, Luna between them holding both their hands, and the setting sun painted everything gold. Years passed in the gentle rhythm of frontier life. Luna started school and proved clever with numbers and letters both. She learned metalwork from Henry and rivercraft from Helena, growing up bilingual in human and orcish culture, comfortable in both worlds. She made friends easily, her mixed heritage a curiosity to some but never a barrier in River's Cleave, where the strange had long since become normal. Helena occasionally heard news of Krev. He had served time for fraud and been released, drifting south toward the coast. Broken Horn had started a small freight business in Southold. Stoneface had disappeared into the Western Territories. The events that had once loomed so large in her life had faded to footnotes, stories from a past that no longer had power over her present. Henry's hair went fully gray, and his hands grew stiff on cold mornings, but he still worked the forge with the same precision and care. Helena's shoulders grew stronger from years of ferry work, and silver threaded through her black hair. They aged together, their bodies changing but their partnership deepening, roots growing down into the good soil of shared life. On a spring morning in their 15th year together, Helena woke to find Henry already up, standing at the window and looking out at the river. She joined him, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Just how much has changed, how much we've built." Henry covered her hands with his. "Remember when this was just a broken-down smithy and a rickety ferry? Look at it now." The view from their window showed a prosperous ferry operation, with 2 boats now running on busy days and a small dock warehouse for cargo storage. The smithy had expanded twice, with apprentices and contracts throughout the valley. Beyond that, River's Cleave itself had grown into a thriving town with more buildings going up every season. "We did good work," Helena said quietly. "We did." Henry turned in her arms, And we're not done yet. I was thinking Luna's almost grown. Another few years and she'll be starting her own life. Maybe it's time we took on a real apprentice at the smithy. Someone to learn the trade, someone we can pass the business to eventually. Already thinking about retirement, thinking about legacy, about making sure what we've built continues. Henry kissed her forehead. And yes, maybe thinking a little about having more time to spend with my wife. There are still places we haven't explored together, things we haven't done. Like what? Like taking a trip to see your family in the north. Like spending whole days doing nothing but sitting by the river. Like growing old together without quite so much responsibility on our shoulders. He smiled. We've earned a little peace, Helena, a little time to just be. Helena thought about it. Thought about the years of work, of building and fighting and proving themselves. Thought about how tired she sometimes felt, how good a slower life might sound. Let's do it, she said. Find apprentices, train them up, and when Luna's settled, we'll start taking those trips. See your family and mine. Explore the territories we've only heard about. Live a little, together. Always together. They sealed the promise with a kiss as the morning sun climbed over the eastern ridge, painting their world in shades of hope and gold. The future unfolded in ways both expected and surprising. They found their apprentice in a quiet young man named Samuel, a human with clever hands and a patient temperament who reminded Henry of himself at that age. Luna, meanwhile, surprised them by declaring her intention to study law with Marcus Day, saying that Rivers Cleave needed someone who understood both human and orcish perspectives. Helena and Henry gradually stepped back from daily operations, letting Samuel and another young woman take over more of the forge work. They kept the ferry but hired steady help, running it themselves only on quiet days when they wanted the peaceful rhythm of water and work. They made their trip north to visit Helena's family, a month-long journey that reconnected her with cousins and aunts and the brother who wept at seeing her alive and well. Henry charmed them all with his steady nature and his obvious devotion to Helena and Luna. They returned to Rivers Cleave with promises to visit more often, the old severed ties mended and strengthened. Life settled into a gentler pattern. They spent mornings at the smithy teaching and afternoons walking the valley trails they had never had time to explore before. They taught Luna everything they knew and watched with pride as she absorbed it all and added her own wisdom besides. They grew older, more comfortable in their skins and in the life they had made. On a summer evening in their 20th year together, as they sat on the porch of their expanded smithy watching fireflies dance over the river, Henry took Helena's hand. "You remember the day I broke my sword?" he asked. "How could I forget? I've thought about that moment so many times over the years, wondered if I did the right thing, if I should have just fought him and ended it quickly." Henry squeezed her hand gently. "But I've decided I was right. Breaking the sword was the best thing I ever did, because it showed everyone that there was another way. That strength isn't about violence. That love is worth more than any weapon." "It was the moment I knew I could trust you completely," Helena said. "When you chose me over everything you'd been trained to be, when you made yourself vulnerable to keep a promise. I'd do it again." Henry's voice was certain. "Every time, in every life, I know." Helena leaned against his shoulder. "That's why I love you." They sat together as the light faded and the stars emerged, the river singing its eternal song below them. Somewhere in the house, Luna was studying, and in the town beyond their boundaries, a community they had helped build was settling into evening routines. The world turned and they turned with it. Two people who had found each other at the edge of everything and built a life from iron and water, from stubbornness and hope. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but no longer frightening. They had faced the worst together and survived it. They had built something real and lasting. Whatever came next, they would face it the same way they had faced everything together, partners, equals, bound by choice rather than obligation. As full dark settled over River's Cleave, Henry and Helena went inside, arms around each other, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The broken sword lay long buried in memory, its pieces rust and dust now. But the promise it represented remained bright as forged steel that safety was more than protection, that love was more than possession, that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was choose peace over violence, creation over destruction, hope over fear. They had chosen well, and the life they had built stood as testimony to the truth that endings could become beginnings, that running could become finding, and that two people from different worlds could forge something stronger than either one alone, a partnership, a family, a home built on water and iron, held together by trust and tenderness, and the simple revolutionary act of choosing each other every single day. The river flowed on in the darkness, carrying their story forward into history, into legend, into the living reality of a community transformed by the courage of two people who loved each other enough to be vulnerable, strong enough to be gentle, and wise enough to know that the greatest strength lay not in weapons but in the breaking of them, in the choice to build rather than destroy, to nurture rather than control, to offer safety rather than demand submission. Their story was not unique or magical. It was simply human and orcish in all the messy, beautiful, complicated glory that came with choosing love over fear. And in being simply that, in refusing to be more than two people trying to live decent lives, they had become something remarkable, proof that the world could change, one relationship at a time, one broken sword at a time, one safe harbor built from scratch at the edge of the wilderness where the river met the shore and two hearts found their home.